Oh man, getting old sucks. This morning I sneezed so hard I hurt my back and my neck. It made me realize that I really need to kind of change my lifestyle, eat better, exercise more. But then the more I thought about it, that seems like a lot of work. So instead, I'm just going to try to sneeze less. Hey kids, Adam here. Hope everyone had a great holiday break. Happy New Year. Hope you're getting a great start to 2022. If you noticed, I took about a month off from doing videos and doing a lot of things actually. Needed to kind of reset myself, reinvigorate, re-energize, No. Yeah, actually. And I've been working on this video for a while, trying to figure out how to put it all together. You'll see the title says, Waves, I'm Gonna Leave You. And yes, that's what's happening. So when I started doing these videos late 2020, I ran into a problem where there was this weird digital glitch coming through one of my channels on my interface when I recorded from Reaper to OBS. I had no idea what it was, kind of narrowed it down and thought it was Waves plugins. Turns out to be, it happens when there's a certain amount of load. Even though CPU and memory resources aren't very high, I think it's maybe a dodgy Steinberg interface driver. Could be a bug with like how Restream feeds into OBS. Could be a bug in OBS. Could be a bug in Reaper. Not exactly sure. I haven't opened up any support cases or anything like that. Certainly not going to do it with Waves because, well, we know where that went. And then late last year, Waves came out with the SSL EV2. And I'll put a link to here of their support response, which is completely ridiculous. In a nutshell, they told me that it's perfectly acceptable and expected usage that the SSL EV2 uses up 40 times more CPU than their previous version and is basically unusable if you want to use it on more than like 5 tracks. So I decided, you know what? I'm cutting Waves' head off. We're done. Off with your head. That's it. I needed something to replace it with, though. And first thing I jumped to was IK Multimedia's T-Racks. My guitarist Dylan uses those in my band Underground Hive. He's been using them for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now, and he really likes them. So I decided to dive in and take a look. I had to come up with an approach. Like, how do I do this? Do I just buy another bundle? Do I look at what plugins I need? So I'm an IT guy. Put together a spreadsheet and a project plan and all that kind of crap. Not a project plan, but I did have a spreadsheet and it's color coded and it may flash up on the screen here somewhere. But I said, these are the plugins I need. I need EQ. I need 1073 EQ. I need SSL channel. I need something for surgical EQ. I need an 1176 compressor. I need a LA2A compressor. I need some sort of like regular compression if I ever use something just normal, straightforward. I need some sort of like preamp analog stuff for the analog goodness. And I'll put a link up here for that video. And then I need some sort of tape emulation / saturation because I'm in love with Kramer tape. And this is going to be one of the harder breakups I've ever had to go through in my life. Not that I've had to go through any real hard breakups, but it's another story. So that was my plan. And I went through all my plugins that I own, what I could get rid of right off the bat, like a lot of the extra weird compressors and EQs and things that come in the Wave Horizon bundle that I own, and then what I actually need to replace it with. First thing I did was start looking at T-Racks, as I mentioned, and started going through, and wow, they have an LA2A, they have a 1073, they have a Pultec, they have some saturation plugin, they have a number of other compressors and EQs. Pull the trigger on it, $250 later, bam, I have T-Racks. And I start heading down the path of remixing the song. Now I started just trying to do like a plugin swap. That didn't work at all. So I ended up just wiping out all the plugins. In fact, I'll put a link to my good friend Mike from Let's Talk About Reaper, his video that he did for how to reset a project to remix it, where you essentially wipe out all your plugins, all your sends, set everything to all your fader to 0, and then you can start over from scratch. And I did that and I mixed it from scratch. We'll get sound samples, we'll get into Reaper and all that in a little bit. And I thought that process went well. Of course, I couldn't leave well enough alone And in talking to Mike, he said, hey, you should check out some of the Analog Obsession stuff. And I was so laser focused on T-Rex replaced that I didn't look at Analog Obsession stuff. Now, these guys are doing this, all free plugins. They're an, kind of a Analog Obsession. They're focused on emulating analog hardware. Their plugins are awesome. It's technically free, but I highly recommend you give them a donation either through Patreon or a one-time donation or whatever you want to do to keep them, them going. But when I started looking at those, they have a lot of the same plugins that I'm using and the same emulations. In fact, they have one that T-Rex didn't have. In fact, they have a couple that T-Rex didn't have, and we'll take a look at those soon. I also have a number of plugins from Hornet. I talked about their gain staging plugin. I'll put a link to that up here. Called their View Meter, which has automatic gain staging on it. And I bought some analog things through them, bought an EQ through them that I used in one place. And I just went down the process of just replacing these plugins. So let's go into Reaper and I'll show you what I started with, what I did, and what I ended up with. All right, here on Reaper, this is my band Underground Hive song, Everything Will Be All Right. It was kind of our mantra for 2020 and what turned out to be 2021, that no matter what's going on, everything will be all right. Take a listen, let me know what you think, and leave me a comment either here or in the video. I'll get it either way. There are a couple of main things that I wanted to focus on in showing you in this project first. And you've seen these in a number of videos, but I just wanted to kind of really quick gloss over what I'm doing. So my master fader here, I'm using the SSL compressor. I'm using a Pultec style EQ for the boost and attenuation trick and a little bit of boost in the highs. I'm using Re-EQ just for some standard. I have like a high pass filter, a high shelf, a cut right around 300 hertz, and then a boost somewhere around 60 hertz. I'm using Kramer tape for some saturation. I'm using this GW Mix-Centric plugin. Get to that in a little bit. And then I just have a limiter and a VU meter on. The only reason I use a limiter is when I'm sending this out to my bandmates as I'm mixing before I go into the mastering process. We'll just get something to listen to at a higher volume so they can compare to everything else. If I go into something like drums, if we look at the kick drum, I'm using the Pultec because I use a Pultec trick on kick. I'm using the SSL channel for all of my EQ compression and gating. I'm using the REEQ because I needed one extra channel to cut where the bass was being boosted. Then I have this plugin called SK10. It's a sub-kick simulator, very similar to like an R bass from Waves. So I'm doing that. Bass, I'm using the Kramer HLS, and I'm just using a little bit of the preamp. And then I have this 700 hertz bump of 2 dB on it, and that's on my main bass channel. And then for one of the bass channels over here, I am using REEQ for a number of EQ moves, high pass, low pass, so a couple cuts in the mid-rangey and along where the kick is, and then a couple boosts to accentuate bass and attack and things. I'm double stacking the Sail A76, the Bluey, to get about 3 dB of gain reduction on each, and then I'm putting Kramer tape on there from some saturation. Guitars, for the most part, I'm using the Shep 73 for EQ, and then I'm using the CLA2A for compression, and then I'm using the Kramer tape for some saturation. I'm using a couple other things in there, but that's for the most part. Keyboards is more of the same. Some things I'm using the exact same I'm using on guitars. Some I'm using more on bass. Some I'm using just kind of generic. Vocals are pretty straightforward. In fact, I have videos for all this stuff. I have a video for how to mix vocals. It's been pretty popular on the channel. One of the things that was really a problem for me were reverbs and delays. I'm using the H delay from Waves on my long delay, and I have a time sync to the project. I'm using True Verb and R Verb for my short, which is a room and in a hall, or long reverbs. As you saw in the video where I replaced plugins with Reaper stock plugins, if I have any cards left, I'll put one up here. I don't know where I am on cards. And YouTube only lets you have 5. I had problems with reverbs. Reverb 8 didn't really do it. Reverb itself, you have to get a impulse response. I kind of wanted the old school plugin style. So that was something I had to look at and find elsewhere. Let's head over to the T-Rex replacement. And again, what I did is I wiped this whole mix out and I started from scratch with the exception of like volume and pan automation. So if we look at this over again, I kind of did a one-to-one replacement on plugins and just got the sounds to sound what I wanted them to. So I own the SSL native plugins, so that's going to replace the Waves plugins very easily because they actually sound a little bit better than the Waves. The T-Rex has a Pultec emulation. Had to do things a little bit differently because it didn't sound exactly the same. I'm using Re-EQ instead of Re-EQ, and I'm doing the same moves with the same settings. For Kramer tape, this is something that I've been talking about in almost every video I've done. I love Kramer tape. What I found is that the Kramer tape emulated an Aphex 350 tape machine. I'll put a picture somewhere if I can find one. And I started researching what that was and found out that the IK Multimedia T-Rex TR Tape Machine 440 is an Aphex 440 emulation. It's the same company. It's not the same machine. And of course, you can get in trouble with the same things from the same company. But I grabbed a demo of it. I tested it out, and I thought it worked really, really well. There's 4 different types of tapes. There's a number of different settings you can do, and I thought it worked out really well. And I'm using this in place for the most part where I'm doing Kramer tape. I'm still using GW Mixcentric. This is going to be my one caveat with Waves. There is no plugin that I can find that does what this plugin does. This plugin does, it's a very like secret sauce-esque type plugin that does EQ, compression, harmonic, like an exciter, and also some saturation all in one knob. I mean, you see as you kind of move this thing up and down, it goes, all over the place to different settings, and it does sound, you can kind of hear mid-scooping in one setting and accentuating in another. There's nothing that replaces this, and this thing, in fact, let me play just a part of the mix here, and I'll cut out when I'll put this on and off. You can see how it just falls apart when I take it out. It gets muddy. It gets not as like it's a perceived stereo width, not as bright. It just, so I leave this on my master channel. I mix through it. This is one of the ones I'm going to keep. It's either $29.99 or $39.99. And if I ever run out of maintenance on it, I'll just buy the new version when it comes out. It doesn't make any sense to keep it going, but I am going to use this. And when I get new computer builds in the future, when I do a new OS build, I will only install this Waves plugin going forward. And then instead of a VU meter, I use the MV Meter 2 by TV Pro Audio. This is a cool, cheap little VU meter. It's actually a little bit better than the Waves because it has a trim on it. And I'll do a video at some point in the future showing you why that can be handy on your mix bus for starting out a mix. But for now, we won't touch it. For drums, let's look at the kick again. I use the SSL native channel strip, and I did this from scratch. So I did a lot of things differently than what I did in the first mix. I used this Chris Lord-Alge trick of doing a 15 dB bump at 8K. And I used compression and gates and all my EQ in this. I did not use the SK10 plugin because I did use something else. I have a send over here called Max Bass. I use the Reaper huge booty bass enhancer on this one, and that was kind of simulated the kick very closely. And then for my other EQ move, I just use Re-EQ just to get that one, like this is where I'm boosting the bass, so I wanted to cut the kick here. Go over to bass. There are 2 plugins by Analog Obsession, which is free, and I'll get into those into that project in a little bit. Called Pre-DD, which is kind of the pre-amp section, and then the HLQSE, which is the EQ section, both of like this Type 69 EQ, which is what the Kramer HLS emulates. I was able to get very, very similar results to that. And one of my other replacements for Kramer Master Tape was this plugin called Barrier, and I'll put a link up to the Noise Floor AV channel where he does a free plugin Friday. This is 3 or 4 weeks ago he did this thing. It's free. you can go from saturation and a little air to like full on, totally blow you out of the water, up to 11 distortion on it. And I think I'm going to use this in a lot of things moving forward, just as color here and there. And it works really well on the bass channel here. And in the bass track itself, I'm using re-EQ for all my EQ moves, basically doing the same exact things as I'm doing with REEQ, adjusted a little bit as I went along. And then because there is no blue version of the 76 for the T-Rex plugins, I did the next best thing, which was the black. I did the same method where I double stacked. I'm getting about 3 dB gain reduction on each. It doesn't sound the same, but it still sounds similar. For saturation on these, I use JS Saturation. I also use the Hornet tape. And this one is kind of a cool little plugin. It's cheap. All the Hornet stuff is like less than $10. There's a number of different types of machines. You can change on hiss level, you can change the input and output, there's auto gain, number of things that you can do on it. It sounds pretty good, and I decided to use that. For guitars, I used the T-Rex 1073, I used the T-Rex LA2A, and then I used the Hornet Analog Stage, which is kind of a preamp, analog preamp simulator, which adds that kind of analog sound that a tape saturation plugin will give. It has a saturation and a hiss. It sounds okay. There's some things going on with it. If you change this model, and I'm not going to do it here, it does like a hard clip on whatever channel it's on. Not good. Fortunately, Reaper is smart enough to auto mute the channel when it sees a dump of like 80 dB on one channel. I have emailed the manufacturer of this plugin. They are aware of that. They say it's by design, which sure. If you're going to be in a studio and hard power something on when something's plugged into it, sure. But for now, we'll leave that. And then pretty much the same thing going on. I said I use SSL for almost all of the keyboards, along with the tape machine, or I used like a 1176 in here for this like arpeggiated keyboard thing. Vocals are pretty much the same, and here we get to the reverbs. I did have a lot of problems finding a good reverb and finding a good delay. What I wound up with is SSL happened to have a sale on their native flex verb, which can do halls, it can do rooms, it can do plates, and it can do chambers. There are a lot of different things. It has like a crossover multiplier amplifier and like a 5-band or 6-band EQ here. There's a built-in compressor. There's just a ton of stuff in this one plugin. And I found that I was able to get settings for almost all of my reverbs. I have a verb short, a verb long. And if we go all the way over here on my drum plate, I'm also using it for a plate verb configuration. And I just kind of match these up so I can get them close to the original sounds. There were a couple of different changes that I had to do, but for the most part, I got the verbs to sound really good and how I liked them. For the long delay, I used Valhalla Supermassive, which has been touted by a lot of people over the years, and I've just kind of ignored it. And I used the preset Make Everything Better because the song is called Everything Will Be All Right, and I wanted it better. And I just kind of dialed in and it sounds similar to the delay that I was using. So that is pretty much it for the T-Rex. And now we head over to the Analog Obsession mix. Now, what I did is I'm not doing this because I want to like get a refund on the T-Rex or anything. There are still a number of plugins in the T-Rex bundle that are really good. And because I have them now, because the guitarist uses them, some of his stuff that he sends over to me, I won't have to like wipe the plugin off and guess what he was doing. I'll have the plugins that he has. But that said, I'm going to move forward with these Analog Obsession plugins, and unless I can't get something to work, this is going to be my go-to. So we go to the master channel. I'm using SSL Native because that's still one of the plugins that I own and I'm going to keep using. The Rare SE is Analog Obsession's version of the Pultec EQ. It also has a mid-side version, which I'm not using, where if you change it to mid-side, the tops will be mid and the bottom will be side. I had to do a lot of changes in this to get it to sound like the T-Rex or the Waves. T-Rex and the Waves sounded pretty similar with similar settings. This one I had to change a little bit. I had to do a much more high boost and I had to change around some frequencies, but I thought I got it sounding pretty good. Re-EQ again for my surgical EQ. That'll be my EQ going forward. I am using the TR5 tape machine. That is not actually part of the T-Rex bundle I bought. I bought the Max bundle for about $250. This was an extra $99, but I think it was good. It sounds good enough that it was well spent. I am going to continue to use this in places. So this will be my one caveat for the T-Rex that I'm still going to use. Still using GW Eccentric, as I talked about previously, and then this MV Meter 2. If we go over to something like the bass, what I'm doing here is I'm doing the same thing, only I'm using the Fetish, which is a blue 1176 emulation. Sounds more like the Waves Bluey than the TR5 black one because they're different models. And I'm using both of those double stacked. The only difference is the fast is on the left, slow is on the right on the dial, whereas in the 1176 it's the opposite. This one actually makes more sense, where in most compressors the fast is to the left and slower. You know, as you increase the milliseconds, it gets slower, which makes sense. If we go to guitars, there is a Brit channel plugin, which is a 1073 EQ along with the preamp. Now there is a Brit Pre, which I will be using in my Analog Goodness. I'll put a link up to that process, which is just the preamp section, which is all I need for that. This one, the 1.6K band, sounds really good, and as does the high channel, which is I think a 12K high shelf channel. For compression, I'm using the Lala, which looks very similar. It looks like an LA2A. There's actually a couple extra options on here. I'm not using but it works basically the same thing. There's a gain, there's a peak reduction, and then they actually have a mix thing here, but I'm really only using these two. And then I'm looking at the gain reduction meter, getting about the same settings that I had before. Other changes, there's not a whole lot. Anywhere I'm using the 1176, I'm using the Fetish. Anywhere I'm using the LA2A, I'm using the Lala. Still using the SSL native in a lot of places. And I believe that is really it. Let's get into some sound samples and see what these sound like. We'll start with the original Waves. We'll go to the T-Rex and we'll go to the Analog Obsession. I'll play 3 different parts of the song. I will put something on the screen where you can see which one's which. Enjoy.
It's estranged from my thoughts again. Oh no, it's strange. So let go. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Let go and love. Oh, everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Let go and love. Let go. Oh, everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Let go and love.
I thought the mixes were very comparable, even though I started out with the T-Rex mix from essentially a brand new mix. I think the drums sound a little bit more cleaner. I think I was able to get the vocals to sound a little bit more cleaner and not as kind of muddied down and I guess, I don't know the word, splashy, splishy, slushy, splushy, one of those. So that is what we have leaving Waves. Sorry, it's been a good run, but I think there's greener pastures ahead. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about Waves plugins? There's a lot of people who really hate everything that Waves does, and I think a lot of it's based on hearsay and really not having the knowledge of what Waves is really doing with their plugins. I think a lot of people see the subscription and say, oh, Waves makes me buy my plugins every year. It's not true. It's actually not true. It is a subscription, so if you want to keep up to date on them, But if you buy a Waves plugin, it's the same as any other plugin that you buy. Granted, there are the Waves Central, and I know a lot of people in Reaper seem to have problems when they update Reaper that Waves Central dies and they lose their plugins. I don't know what the deal is. I've never had that before. Never had an issue with Waves Central losing things. I have uninstalled and reinstalled for troubleshooting purposes that turn out to be completely something else, not having to do with Waves or Reaper. But I've never ran into that issue. But let me know what you think of Waves, what other plugins you're using, if you're using bundles or if you're using one-offs. Now, I try not to go crazy, and I try not to like buy every single plugin when it goes on sale. I have gone a little bit overboard in the last couple of years, but I think I have a solid foundation. In fact, now that I'm done with this exercise, I will go through and do a video of my top plugins, and they're going to be it should be no surprise to anyone who's seen this. I may throw a couple surprises in here and there, but it should be no surprise to anyone seeing my videos of what I'm using, SSL 1073. I won't give it away now. It'll be another video. Well, the only other thing I was going to say here was there is slightly more CPU usage for the T-Rex versus the Waves and for Analog Obsession versus the Waves. When I have this, so this project here is 68 channels, including all of my sends and all of my folders. Plugins, I'm probably 3/4 of the channels, maybe more. The Waves CPU average around 15% with everything on and just playing through the song. The T-Rex bundle average about 25% with everything on, and the Analog Obsessions average about 23% CPU. Now, granted, none of these are numbers to worry about. And with 68 channels, I could probably double it and really not have any issues because you really don't want to get over like 65, 70%, but anywhere in the 50 to 60, you should be just fine. So I should be just fine with all my mixes moving forward. If not, we'll deal with it when the time comes. So anyway, if you like this video, leave me a comment below, hit like, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell thingy. The channel's been doing really well lately, almost to 500 subscribers, may even hit it by the time this video hits. My goal is to hit 1,000 by the end of the year, so see what you can do and help me with that. Sharing really helps, liking, and actually leaving a comment really helps get kind of the algorithm to pick up the video and bring it to the top of the list of me babbling about whatever I'm babbling about at the time. So yeah, stay tuned. I have some exciting things coming up. I want to tease something that I'm doing. I may be doing a free mixing course end to end in several parts, like a dozen chapters or 10 or 5 or 200 or whatever. But it will be completely free on the channel. We're working on that, and I've been working on that for the last couple of months. It'll take me a while. I would say springtime. Keep an eye out for that. Maybe later. Probably now that I've said it, it'll probably be fall. But keep an eye on that. In the meantime, have yourselves an amazing week. This morning I sneezed so hard. Yeah, that's what I did. And this is take 763. Waves, 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 waves. I'm gonna leave you.